Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, depending on where you are in the world. Today, we're going to look at the discussion points that have been occurring within the whole Dawa circle and in the whole world of apologetics connected to the idea of whether the Quran is a preserved text or not. This all really started with Dr. Shabir Ali, who released a video a couple of weeks back in which he acknowledged something that Christians like Dr. J. Smith and people like Hatun Tash have been arguing for ages, which is simply the case that the claim that the Quran is a perfectly preserved book to the letter and the dot is a false claim. And the evidence doesn't support it. And for those of us that have been involved in this kind of world for more than a year, we know that that is very much what has been argued and debated and presented by Muslim apologists in various different formats, in which they've claimed that everything is perfectly preserved. Peace be with you, Tanya. Good to see you. Hope you're well. That has been a Muslim apologist claim. I know when I used to go to the masjid, that is the thing that was told to me. I'm well, Leo. I hope you're well as well. God bless you, bro. Peace be with you, Peter. And so it is something that we're going to look at now and discuss. Obviously, when someone like Dr. Shabir Ali comes forward and he acknowledges these textual variants, it's a big deal. It's a big deal because people like Ahmadidat, I remember reading his book, The Bible or the Quran, when I was first exploring Christianity and Islam and I was thinking about becoming a Muslim. That he argued that the Quran had been perfectly preserved for 1400 years and never been changed, not to a dot or a letter, and that every text of the Quran was the same. And that was also a claim that used to go along with that. And Jay, like a great missionary that he is, and missionary is not a dirty word for Christians, has been hammering at that lie for decades. And Dr. Shabir Ali has come out and confirmed, actually, that yes, not every text in the Quran is the same, that there are different texts. And then interesting, Dr. Yasser Kadi did an interview with Mohammed Hijab. Checks in the post, Mohammed, thanks for this. Who basically was asked a simple question. If I was to give you a blank mushaf, which is a text upon which the Quran is, a page material upon which the Quran is written, and you were to write down, would it be what was revealed? That was the statement. And Dr. Yasser Kadi simply said, it's not that simple. It's not that simple, but why shouldn't it be that simple? You know, if we are able to say that what we are reciting today is what Muhammad was reciting 1400 years ago, why is it not that simple just to write it down on a blank piece of paper? Dr. Yasser Kadi was very vehement. He was arguing the fact that the questions that are being asked in Western academia are not answered by the historical traditional narrative that we receive in the Hadiths. Okay. So in answer to your question, Agent, I think, yes, the apologists, and this is what we're seeing, is that basically the idea that it's as simple as a recitation chain and a text that has been perfectly preserved, as if these two things are just mirrors of one another, is now demonstrably false. And I want to be fair to Dr. Shabir Ali and Dr. Yasser Kadi. They both believe that the Quran is perfectly preserved. They're not arguing anything different. But I think the thing is, they are acknowledging something that no longer can be denied because it has now been made public for so long and for so many people that the apologists within the Dawa circles are now having to address it. And so what we're seeing is, not for the first time, a collapse of the Dawah narrative and a retreat to something that is more academic. Just like they used to argue that our Lord was never crucified, and they've given up that lie, and now they accept that a man, a historical figure called Christ Jesus, was nailed to a cross. But now they're trying to say that he didn't die on a cross, he was just nailed to a cross. And so what I thought was, the thing that I found interesting was the bit that he was talking about, the idea that there is the questions being asked inside Western academia are not being answered by the traditional narrative. And so what that made me think was, I'll go back to some of the hadiths and just see what they say, and see if we can pinpoint why he was arguing that it isn't answering the questions of Western academia. Now, I've spoke with JC, and he says that I'm not interactive enough, so I'm going to be a bit more interactive. Okay, and it is, as you say, Zealous. It is exactly that. It's a case of, when they wear their hat of an academic, they say one thing. When they wear their hat of a pious Muslim, they say something else. Yasser Qadi is on record as saying that he had made a decision as he entered into academia, saying that everything could be questioned except the Quran, that he wouldn't touch that. And he made that decision before any study. So, you know, when someone's making that decision, they're clearly saying, it doesn't matter what the evidence is, I'm going to not cross this red line. Yeah. So let us start, as we always do, in prayer. And there's no greater prayers than the prayers in the Bible. So in Psalm 27 we read, "The Lord is my light and my salvation. Whom shall I fear? The Lord is the stronghold of my life. Of whom shall I be afraid? When evildoers assail me to devour my flesh, my adversaries and foes, they shall stumble and fall. Though an army encamp against me, my heart shall not fear. Though war rise up against me, yet I will be confident. One thing I ask of Yahweh, that will I seek after, to live in the house of Yahweh all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of Yahweh, and inquire in his temple. For he will hide me in his shelter in the day of trouble. He will conceal me under the cover of his tent. He will set me high on a rock. Now my head is lifted up above my enemies all around me, and I will offer in his tent sacrifices with shouts of joy. I will sing and make melody to Yahweh. Hear, O Yahweh, when I cry aloud. Be gracious to me and answer me. Come, my heart says, seek his face. Your face, Yahweh, do I seek. Do not hide your face from me. Do not turn your servant away in anger, you who have been my help. Do not cast me off. Do not forsake me, O God of my salvation. If my father and mother forsake me, Yahweh will take me up. Teach me your ways, O Yahweh, and lead me on a level path because of my enemies. Do not give me up to the will of my adversaries, for false witnesses have risen against me, and they are breathing out violence. I believe that I shall see the goodness of Yahweh in the land of the living. Wait for Yahweh. Be strong, and let your heart take courage. Wait for the Lord." So, no, I was reading from the NRSV on that one, Wedingo. So, I'm not even sure, what does Wedingo mean? Anyway, so moving on then. So I'm going to go through the hadiths, and I'm going to read the hadiths, and I'm going to put in my comments and my questions and my thoughts around it. Just to let you know, what I'll be reading is from Sahih al-Bukhari, as translated by Dr. Mohammed Mushin Khan of the Islamic University of Medina and Al-Munawwara. and published by Dar al-Hayat al-Sunnah, and the page numbers thus reflect this edition. So if you can't find it in your stuff, in the hadiths that you have on your bookshelves, don't blame me, blame the fact that the Ummah haven't created a standardized verse system like we did at the Reformation with our Bibles. Now, so let's start then. It comes in two phases. We've got the first one that happened under Abu Bakr, and then we have another one that happened under Uthman. And we're going to read the relevant hadith, and I'm going to give my comments on each hadith, and then I'm going to talk to you guys, and then I go back to the next one, and hopefully we'll get through everything. But if we don't, we don't, and I'll just pick it up at another time. Do keep me in your prayers, guys. I want to say to everyone, peace be with you, Akuma, peace be with you, Jay, peace be with you, Drummer Boy, peace be with you, Zealous, Princess Rainbow, peace be with you. Apologize if I don't greet you all, and for the moment, I'm just going to focus in on the presentation. So, narrated by Zayd bin Thabit, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq sent for me when the people of Yamama had been killed. Now, just stop for a minute. The death of the memorizers at the Battle of Yamama is what precipitated the gathering of the Quran into a singular copy, as we're going to see. And this does imply, therefore, that the Quran was seen by the author of this hadith, or at least he wished it to be seen, as being an oral transmission. Now, we've got to be fair when we go through this. I think we're going to see the fact that actually, Muslim belief about the Quran being a memorized thing and about something that people had memorized is evidenced, and then you can extrapolate from that the idea of an oral transmission. The hadith goes on. Then Abu Bakr sent to me, "You are a wise young man, and we do not have any suspicion about you. And you used to write the divine inspiration for Allah's apostle." Stop. Now, this shows that the connection to the oral transmission that we've seen in the line above and the textual transmission of the Quran are codependent. That in fact the Quran was also a written transmission and was written before it was an oral one in terms of the community. After all, after the crisis of Yamama, bearing in mind that there's a crisis that occurs at Yamama, the resulting desire is to gather and copy the Quran into a single text, rather than, which could have happened if the apologist narrative had any kind of truth to it, is just to resource and to develop schools of recitation. Clearly, earlier Muslims saw things differently from today's apologists. Muslims should be honest with themselves. And I ask this to any Muslim who watches this. When you learn the Quran recitation, do you use a text to help you? Why would that be any different from the past? The hadith continues. So you should search for the fragmentary scripts of the Quran and collect it in one book. Stop. Now, think about this. Why would you do this? Why would you collect the various fragments of the Quran into a single text if you could just sit down with one or two or even three people who had memorized the Quran, who had survived the Battle of Yamama, and just write down what they said? Why wouldn't you do that instead? It might take you a year, it might take you 2 years, but it'd be a done job. And now, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but Zayd bin Thabit is said to have had his own mushaf at this point in time. So he already had done this work as a private citizen, if I'm correct, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So why didn't you just go, well, let's use this one? And so Abu Bakr and a number of other companions are all said to have had their own private copies of a complete Quran. So why didn't they just pick one of these up? It's an interesting question. And I think these are the kinds of questions that Yasser Qadi is referring to. And obviously, you can come back and correct me if I'm wrong. why not just copy one of those, or even use a number of these different mushafs and a number of different reciters to create a standard version? After all, do not Muslims think that they can do this today? I mean, isn't that the claim of Adnan Rashid and Mansour and Mohammed Hijab? Wasn't that the presumption behind the question that Mohammed Hijab asked Dr. Yasser Qadi? The fact that they did not do this suggests that A, earlier Muslims did not have a single autograph to work from. That's what it suggests. Otherwise, why didn't they use it? B, that they were not confident that all of the Quran had been preserved by the survivors of Yamama. Because if they had, why didn't they just sit two of them down and copy out what they said? And C, they felt that the Quran was in danger of being lost. I mean, why would you act this way unless you felt that something was in danger? And finally, D, that Tabit was or alternatively, Zayd bin Tabit was catastrophically lacking in lateral thinking to do what seems to be obvious if all the claims are correct. The hadith continues. By Allah, if they had ordered me to shift one of the mountains, it would not have been heavier for me than this ordering me to collect the Quran. Now this shows that Tabit was not aware that he owned a mushaf, or that Abu Bakr had owned a mushaf. Because again, why didn't you just say, well, I'll take yours and I'll take mine and we'll do it from that? This is a statement probably of piety, you know, this great sense of the gravitas of the work. I mean, let's try to be charitable. But it could also be a statement about he felt that the task was impossible. The hadith continues. Then I said to Abu Bakr, how will you do something which Allah's apostle did not do? Abu Bakr replied, by Allah, it is a good project. Stop. Think about that. Here we see there is bid'ah right at the birth of Islam. The Quran states that Islam was a perfected religion. Now, they are doing something that Muhammad did not do, meaning that Muhammad did not have a mushaf, a compiled Quran, that he had passed on to the community. Nor did Tabit, nor did Abu Bakr. Or one of them would have said, hey, use this one. Islam is meant to be a perfect religion. But here you see an example of perfection being improved. And nothing says perfection like improvement. Why did Muhammad and Allah not foresee this problem? Why is it being left to the companions to rescue the Quran? The hadith continues. So I started looking for the Quran and collecting it from what was written on palm leaves, stalks, thin white stones, and also from men who knew it by heart. Now this tells us, when you think about it, this tells us that the people who survived the Battle of Yamama did not know the whole of the Quran in themselves. After all, why not just sit with a small group of them and write out what they say? Furthermore, it shows that earlier Muslims did not see the oral preservation as sufficient a witness to the certainty of the Quran's preservation. Otherwise, they wouldn't have acted in the way that they did. And finally, it shows the fragility of the Quran as a text within the earliest Muslim community. It's on stalk leaves, it's on thin white stones, it's in men's hearts, it's got little scraps here and little scraps there. That's a very fragile place to begin with. It's in people's hearts, but it doesn't seem to be that one person has it all in his heart. Furthermore, if these materials were the first things that the Quran was written on, why would we not see them being preserved? Why is it none of them have survived down to the present? I mean, again, please correct me if I'm wrong, but this would be, something that you'd want to hold on to for sure. It'd be something that you would want to keep and preserve, and you would want to look after it. I mean, after all, isn't it precious to you? Why aren't these things in museums? Why is it the Muslim community lost them? Where did they go? So I was reading from Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 6, 509, which can be found on the above mentioned text on page 478 to 479. Now, what it appears is happening here is that the writers of the Hadith are trying to address concerns felt in their own time. Because bear in mind, the Hadiths were written hundreds of years later. They weren't written at the time of Muhammad. And certainly that the Quran, they were trying to offer certainty that the Quran was from Muhammad, answering the felt questions of how did we arrive at what was before us in the 9th century. It could be an attempt to justify recent to its own times attempts to standardize the Islamic text of the Quran. And there is certainly evidence that the Muslim community have attempted over history to try and standardize the text. Now, moving on. It is reported from Ali who said, "May the mercy of Allah be upon Abu Bakr, the foremost of men to be rewarded with the collection of the manuscripts, for he was the first to collect the text between two covers." Stop and think what you just heard. Now, taken at face value, this hadith seems to contradict the above hadith. If Abu really was the first to have a compiled Quran and not Zayd bin Thabit, why bother commissioning by Zayd bin Thabit at all to do the work? Why not just give him his codex and say, here, use this, and check it with some of the people who know it by heart? A reconciliation, of course, is possible. You could simply say that by the actions commissioned by Abu Bakr through Zayd bin Thabit, or being a credit to Abu Bakr in this hadith as being the one that first commissioned that kind of work. So, there's a workaround. And you get that from Ibn Abi Dawud, Kitab al-Masahif, page 5. It is reported from Ibn, and I'm going to slaughter this name unfortunately, Buraida, who said, the first of those who collect the Quran into a mushaf, which is the Arabic equivalent of a codex, was Salim, the freed slave of Abu Hudahaifa. Yeah, apologies for my killing of Arabic names. Now, here again, we've got a problem. If we have complete copies lying around, why does Zayd bin Thabit need to do what he is asked to do in the earlier hadith? Why does he feel it is such a weighty task to do something that has already been done? And why does he think that some verses were only found with one person? That's important. If you have other people that have a complete Quran, and then Zayd bin Thabit thinks that some verses have only been found with one person, well, that would suggest that they're not in the Qurans of these other people. Otherwise, they'd be found in two people, or with two people. If multiple codexes are available to make use of, if these codexes were reliable, why gather the original fragments? I think these are the kinds of questions that Dr. Yasser Qadhi was talking about. Now, these hadiths, I think, probably came later. Well, they definitely came later. And for me, they account for the kinds of questions I'm asking about the idea that the Quran is preserved at the time of the 9th century. I think that's the kind of question that they're answering. They're addressing those concerns. And Muslims were, as we'll see, were noticing differences. And so they were having to reconcile the reality of those differences by pinning it further back than the so-called Uthmanic standardized text. Okay. I'm just going to read my note there and just make sure that I've said what I wanted to say. Yeah, so they were pushing the idea back beyond Uthman's standardization. Okay, so how are you finding it, guys? Are you finding this useful? Are you finding it interesting? Please drop us a 1 if you are and a 2 if you're not, just so that I know it's worthwhile. Let me just get this. Got a bit. Right. So, thank you, Ronnie. At least someone's listening. Everyone else has probably just gone to, oh, there we go. Everyone's listening. Brilliant. Tatanya is very emphatic. Thank you. God bless you guys. So, moving on to the next bit of evidence. Many of the passages of the Quran that were down were known by those who died on the day of Yamamah, but they were not known by those who survived them. Wow. Just think about what you heard. Many of the passages of the Quran were known by those who died on the day of Yamamah, but they were not known by those who survived them. Just think about what you heard. This is an embarrassing admission, and therefore it should not simply be dismissed, because people are unlikely to invent stories that put them in a bad light. Therefore, when Muslim sources themselves are suggesting that portions of the Quran are lost, that should actually give us reason to believe that it is a genuinely ancient belief. This would concur with the evidence suggested in the very first hadith that we looked at, and this also suggests at the time of writing, the author of this material did not share the confidence of today's apologists that such material had been preserved in memorization or in writing. This continues. Nor were they written down. Oh my gosh, this just got worse. Because immediately the apologist mind goes, well, yeah, maybe they didn't survive in a oral transmission, but they were written down somewhere, and then Zayd bin Thabit was able to recover them from that. But no, it says clearly, nor were they written down. Now, please note, the author here believes that it is necessary to say in writing, showing that early Muslims saw the preservation as a dual track. So the fact is, this author of this particular passage, Ibn Dawood, Kitab al-Masahif, page 23, is saying that it was in oral and in written form. And it didn't survive in either the oral or the written form, which means that he thought that any kind of preservation had to go along 2 tracks, not 1 track, as our modern day apologists are retreating to. And it says, didn't survive orally or in writing. It continues, nor had Abu Bakr, Umar, or Uthman by that time collected the Quran, nor were they found with even 1 person after them. That's pretty devastatingly embarrassing. And this is quite emphatic a statement. It's literally saying, black and white, there's bits of the Quran that are lost. They were known by people at the Battle of Yamamah, but they weren't known by the people that survived the Battle of Yamamah. They weren't written down, and they were gone before Uthman, Abu Bakr, Umar had managed to compile a Quran. It's quite clear. The fact that this is such an embarrassing statement means that it falls under the criteria of embarrassment, which means that we shouldn't dismiss it, because communities don't make up embarrassing stories. It's a bit like, why would Mark hang the first testimony of the witnesses upon women, especially when in the first century women couldn't even give testimony in Jewish courts because their testimony was not to be believed. It's an embarrassing story, so embarrassing that even when Paul gives his lists of witnesses, he just gently sidesteps the fact that the women were there, which showed, the reality of that kind of embarrassing criteria. Moving on. Next one is from As-Sayuti al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, page 524. It reads, "It is reported from Ismail ibn Ibrahim, from Ayub, from Nafi, from Ibn Umar, who said, 'Let none of you say, I have acquired the whole of the Quran. How does he know what all of it is when much of the Quran has disappeared? Rather let him say, I have acquired what has survived.'" That's pretty black and white. You know how the Dawah team say, show me in black and white, show me a clear statement, show me a non-ambiguous statement. Well, this is very non-ambiguous. It is very clear. It is saying, you haven't got all the Quran. You've got what survived. That much of it has gone. Now, it's a very clear statement. These words speak for themselves, and they don't need much further commentary, except to state that there is clear evidence that earlier generations of Muslims, much closer to the time of Muhammad in culture, time and space and language, did not have the confidence that today's Islamic apologists have. One has to obviously ask the question, why, taking into account other archaeological evidence, as demonstrated by people like Dan Gibson and Jay Smith and Dr. Daniel Brubaker and Dr. Keith E. Small, it seems clear that the Quran we have today is not identical to the one of earlier times, despite a genuine effort both to preserve and standardize the text. Furthermore, what we have here is evidence that match the criteria of embarrassment and the idea of multiple independent sources saying the same thing. Along with archaeological evidence, it makes it very clear that Quranic preservation is a highly questionable historical claim. Now, I want to be clear. I believe that the Quran is a very well preserved text. Very well preserved text. Extremely well preserved text. It's just not perfectly preserved. But the thing is, if your religion hangs on it being perfectly preserved, if it is even changed by 1%, it's out of the water. Adnan Rashid said that a preserved text itself doesn't prove that something is from God. But if a text claims to be from God, it should be preserved. Kind of paraphrasing Adnan Rashid there. But those words bite you in the ass when basically you've got strong evidence against the idea of a preserved text. Reading from Sahih al-Muslim, volume 2, Hadith 3421, found on page 740 of the above mentioned collection. Aisha, Allah be pleased with her, reported that it had been revealed in the Quran that 10 clear sucklings make the marriage unlawful. Then it was abrogated by 5 sucklings, and Allah's apostle died, and before that time it was found in the Quran. Before that time it was found in the Quran. Here we have a third source independently verifying what the other sources are saying, but with a clear example. Here the author of this hadith ascribes to Aisha the belief that the Quran changed before and after Muhammad's death. This change may have been justified as an abrogation before Muhammad's death. However, this begs the question, why do some of those abrogated verses in the Quran survive in the Quran today and others do not? What this suggests is that the filtering process of what was removed from the Quran before Muhammad died and abrogated was simply ad hoc. But it also demonstrates that there was further loss after Muhammad's death that is not accounted for. I think what I think this all points to in my sort of summary conclusion, and I've not finished, not even by a long shot, I'm just jumping ahead because I want to get my conclusion in before I run out of time, is the idea that there was far more revealed as the Quran in the time of the Prophet than ever made it into the very first codex of the Quran. That there was much more said, and that actually what ended up being in any codex was far less. And an example to prove my point, here's another one. From As-Suyuti al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, page 524. Zayd ibn Hubaysh reported Ubay ibn Ka'b said to me, what is the extent of Surah Azab? Now, just for those of you that don't know, it's 73 ayahs. Okay, so bear that in mind. Ubay ibn Ka'b said, I said, 70. Now, please note, the author was unsure about the number of the verses in his own time, or 73. So he's saying 70 or 73. He's not quite sure. Fair enough. Bad memory. He said, yet it used to be equal to Surah Baqarah. Now the problem is, Surah Baqarah is 286 ayahs long. So it used to be, it is today 73, but it used to be considered 286. Again, this is independent, it's embarrassing, and it demonstrates that at least the version of the Quran known to this person, whether this person is really Ibn Ka'b or just the person that's writing the Hadith, was different from the version of the Quran known to our own time, or possibly at the time of Muhammad, before he died, with a huge section being removed or lost. We don't know. Why would you say this? It's not a small number. This is a comparison that is made, and it demonstrates a loss of over 100, I think 100, over 150 ayahs, over 150 verses. And it's ironic that, you know, you hear people like Hashim and Mansour and those guys all saying, oh, you never hear Muslims argue about how many ayahs are in the Quran or how many surahs. Well, actually, it would seem that they were doing it in the past, not today. Now, continuing. Sahih Muslim, volume 2, ayah hadith 2286, found on page 501. We used to recite a surah which resembled in length and severity the surah Barat. I have, however, forgotten it, with the exception of this, which I remember out of it. If there were 2 valleys full of riches for the son of Adam, he would long for a 3rd valley, and nothing would fill the stomach of the son of Adam but dust. Now here the hadith suggests that one of the companions of the Prophet forgot a whole section of the Quran except for one verse, the verse quoted, and which is not found in the Quran today. Now, this brings up a number of points. Firstly, that the Quran of his day, the one known to him, was different from the one known in our time. The second is that if we allow a Muslim apologist's argument and we do a stress test of their argument that the Quran is an oral transmission, that means that every recitation difference counts as a variant, a bit like a textual variant. And each time they forget a word, a letter, a passage, this counts as a variant in the same way that you would have a textual variant. Every oral transmission, therefore, that is imperfect counts as a variant recitation. This here is a witness to a different oral transmission variant. Now, hope you're following me, guys. Yep. Yes, Gregorian, there are Shias that do argue that, and thank you, peace be with you, Matthew. Hope you guys are doing all right. Hope we're doing good. Moving on. Do you want to fire at a question while I'm reading? I'm not going to see it. So if you want me to see what you've got to say, then you need to wait until I'm talking like this so that you can catch my eye. Okay? Oh, my computer is rubbish. It isn't actually. It was a very genuine gift. It's just me. I'm such a boomer tech. I don't know even how to work it properly. Honestly. Anyway, thanks be to God. Let's move on. So in Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 5, hadith number 416, found on page 288, we read, "We used to read a verse of the Quran. Stop. Please note again the fact that the Muslim writer here is saying that we're learning the Quran from written text. We used to read a verse of the Quran." So he's saying that, you know, that's the means of transmission. So that means that textual variants do count. The kind of argument made by Hatun Tash and Dr. Dan Brubaker and Dr. Keith E. Small and Dr. J. Smith, they count because the earliest Islamic sources give credence to the idea of the Quran as a written transmission. Revealed in their connection, it continues, but later the verse was cancelled. It was, "Convey to our people on our behalf the information that we have met our Lord and he is pleased with us and has made us pleased." Interesting verse. What's that talking about? Now here the hadiths are clear. A verse was being recited for the martyrs of the Ansari, 70 of them, which had been sent off by Muhammad to their deaths because Allah didn't bother to tell Muhammad that they were going to an ambush. And it was recited by Muslims in memory, so it's like a message. But it's not found in the Quran today. It's evidence that the earliest Quran is not like our modern Quran. Now, since martyrdom is a big part of Islam, just like it's a big part of Christianity, what theologically needs to be changed for this verse to be cancelled? Why did it get abrogated? These people were special martyrs. Were they special martyrs above other martyrs? It's not like it's teaching something that Muslims don't believe in, but yet it was abrogated at the time of Muhammad. So this is evidence to the thesis point that there was more of the Quran revealed at the time of Muhammad than we have in the books today. We can continue in Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 8, hadith 817, found on page 539. Allah sent Muhammad with the truth and revealed the holy book to him. And among what Allah revealed was the verse of Rajam. For those of you who are uninitiated, Rajam is the punishment for adulterers, and it's understood to be stoning. Now, just think for a moment what you've heard. It is said to be revealed by Allah as part of the book of Muhammad. That's what it said. It was understood to be the Quran at the time. As it says, Allah sent Muhammad with the truth and revealed the holy book to him, and among what Allah had revealed was the verse of the Rajam, which is the stoning of married persons, male and female, who commit adultery. Stop for a minute. Think about what you've heard. Do men and women still commit adultery? What's changed? Nothing. They still commit adultery. Was the punishment originally given imperfect and needed to be improved by a different punishment? Think about that for a minute, because of what comes next. Furthermore, many Muslims still practice stoning, and yet this is not what is prescribed in the Quran of today. For instance, the Hanafi school gives guidance on how best to stone people. No shit, guys. Sorry. No lie. That is actually, you actually get guidance on how to stone someone. There's a good way to throw a brick at someone's head, and a bad way to throw a brick at someone's head. Who would have thought? Now, but the hadith continues. And we did recite this verse and understood and memorized it. So they recited the verse and they memorized the verse. So they were treating it like the Quran. That means, therefore, it counts as a variant recitation. The hadith continues. Allah's apostle did carry out the punishment of stoning, and so did we after him. They witnessed that they practiced it. So just think what you've heard. They've witnessed that they practiced it, and by him, and then after him. One assumes that they practiced it after he died. So where is the verse of stoning in the Quran today? Where is it? It's not there. But it was treated like the Quran, and it was understood to be the Quran of its time. The hadith continues. I'm afraid, why would you... Now, sorry, I've not highlighted my notes to separate them from the text of the hadith, so when I catch myself, I'm having to change it. Right, hold on. Let me just correct that. Okay. I'm afraid, it said. So why would you be afraid if it was a deliberate act to remove it? The hadith continues that after a long time has passed, somebody will say, by Allah, we do not find the verse of Rajam in Allah's book. Please note, book, verse, recitation, read, memorization. Muhammad practices it, but it's not in the Quran today. Is this, and incidentally, is this not exactly what we find Muslims saying in the world today? That the Quran does not support the practice of stoning, so therefore we shouldn't stone people? The hadith was written in the 9th century, and in the 21st century we have Muslims arguing against stoning because they can't find it in the Quran. And thus they will go astray, leaving an obligation which Allah has revealed. So the writer of this hadith, whoever it was, understood that the practice of stoning was connected to the Quran. It was revealed, it was memorized, it was in the book. It's not there today. It was lost at the time, according to this hadith. It was lost way back at the time of the companions. Ibn Ishaq in Sirat Rasulullah in page 684 says this: verily stoning in the book of God is a penalty laid on married men and women who commit adultery. If proof stands, or pregnancy is clear, or confession is made. Clearly, at the time of Ibn Ishaq, at the very least, he felt that stoning was in the Book of God, or at least the one he was familiar with. So the obvious question is, where's the command to stone adulterers in the Quran today? Really simple question. If it's not there, then we've got an issue. So let's who's on with me. Peace be with you, Takia. Simon, we got to talk, bro. Who else have we got? Yeah. Okay. Those are just statements. I'm going to press on. So, reading from Muwatta Ibn Malik, page 350. Ibn Shihab reported that a man in the time of the Apostle of Allah acknowledged having committed adultery and confessed it 4 times. The Apostle of Allah then ordered that he was stoned. So the practice of stoning is evidenced as being something that Muhammad did. Muhammad is said to have revealed a verse about stoning and practiced it. Muslims, or some Muslims, still practice stoning today, even receiving guidance about the best way to throw bricks at someone's head. Though some do not, and that's important. Why don't they? And the reason that they give is that there's no verses in the Quran supporting the idea of stoning. So if Muhammad practiced stoning without a Quranic injunction to do so, and therefore in contradiction to the clear instruction from Allah about what to do with adulterers, which is to lash them, just in case you're interested, yeah, doesn't that mean therefore that Muhammad has committed bid'ah? That he has done something that Allah has not commanded him? Allah says whip, Muhammad says stone, and yet Muhammad trumps Allah. Does that make him an innovator? Doesn't that make him a false prophet even by Islamic standards? Someone who mixes his own judgments and opinions with those of Allah because he is the status of a prophet? Everyone does what he says. So we have multiple independent sources of Islamic tradition all testifying to the idea of stoning, but yet we have no Quranic injunction to do so. Conclusions. Muhammad gets to trump the Quran. Well, that doesn't work because that would be internally incoherent. The Quran at one time said stoning and now doesn't. Well, that's bad because that means the Quran's been changed. You choose. Reading from Masyuti al-Ikan fi Ulum al-Quran, again from page 524. Zibir ibn Hubasai reported Ubay ibn Ka'b said to me, "What is the extent of Surah Ahzab?" I said 70 or 73 verses. He said, "Yet it used to be equal to Surah Baqarah, and in it we recited the verse of stoning." Now that's something that we referred to earlier in our talk. We're just going back to it and looking at it in a bit more detail, but it's now relevant to the issue of stoning. It clearly identifies that a stoning verse was there. Thus, the corpus of the Quran at the time of Muhammad is clearly said to be larger than it is today. I said, "And what is the verse of stoning?" He replied, "The fornicators amongst the married men and married women, stone them as an exemplary punishment from Allah, and Allah is the mighty and wise." So it actually gives the verse. Okay? Here the stoning verse is revealed as being of certain words. Where are these words today? This shows that the Quran of Muhammad's day is different from the Quran that succeeded him, with such strong evidence that even Muslim practice continues the practice of stoning. It's hard to believe that there could have been no Quranic injunction to ground this kind of behavior on, the absence of which would lend its support that much of what we think of Islam today as being was simply invented after the time of Muhammad and had therefore to be reconciled to the cultural practices that predate it. So in other words, it's the idea that you've got this practice of stoning that's so deeply rooted within Islamic culture, which was something that predated Islam. Let's be fair. It's not that the Muslims invented stoning. Other people were doing it, including the Jews. And yet we don't find any Quranic injunction for it. So what's going on? The Hadiths are trying to reconcile something. The absence of a Quranic injunction to do something, and the fact that the culture is doing it at the time that these kinds of words were written. So how do you reconcile that? How do you rationalize and justify the existence of a practice that you deem to be Islamic when you can't prove it in the Quran? Well, you make up a hadith that simply says it was in the Quran, but then we lost it. And then you can justify continuing to throw bricks at people's heads if they've committed adultery, but not having any Quranic injunction to do so. And that's what appears to be happening. Rory, you want to join the discussion? Type out for me your reasons, bro. What is it that you want to say? Can I bring the camera down a bit? You got tired of looking at my face? Hold on. Oh yeah, I see what you mean. As you can see, my great office is simply my bedroom. Right, so pressing on. Peace be with you guys. I hope you're all doing well. For anyone who's joined us, see we're at 50 now. Now, moving on. Reading from As-Sayuti. Oh wait, have we read that one? Yes, we have. So I hope you got that point, guys, because it's a really interesting point. This idea about the stoning, it's really interesting. It just seems to me that what's happening is stoning adulterers was a popular practice, probably would be today if you put it up for a vote. And it's got no Quranic justification. So hadiths had to be invented that simply say that it used to be in the Quran, but now we've lost it. Which is an admission that the Quran of yesteryear at the time of Muhammad or around his time was much bigger than what we have today. Carrying on, As-Sayuti al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran, page 528. Zayd bin Thabit and Sayyid ibn al-As were writing out the Mus'haf, the written codex of the Quran. And when they came to this verse, Zayd said, I heard the Messenger of Allah say, the adult men and women who commit adultery stone them as a punishment. Umar said, when it was revealed, I went to the Prophet and said, shall I write it? But he seemed very reluctant. That's fascinating, isn't it? Think about that. They understood it as being revealed, but were reluctant to put it. It seems that Muhammad was reluctant to put it in the Quran. Here the witness seems to be that Muhammad was reluctant to have it written, implying that it was not written, but not saying that it was lost, nor saying that it was not revealed. However, it was revealed and it was recited. So it was recited but not written. However, now at the time of Umar and Zayd bin Thabit, it seems to be suggesting that they were editing the Quran. This may explain why it cannot any longer be found, but why it is said to be present by so many other witnesses. So they're saying that it was revealed, they're saying that it was recited, they were saying that it was known, but now this particular hadith is suggesting that it wasn't written. Or another possibility is that a later tradition is trying to account for the fact that something that was Islamic practice is not found in the Quran, and they're trying to explain that discrepancy away. Reading from Muwatta Ibn Malik, page 352. Okay. Rory. Okay, Rory, you can definitely come on, mate. But just let me try and get through the presentation as best as I can. Or what I might do is I might come back on later on today and do a follow-up, and we can sort of discuss it, as a launching off point to, a general conversational show. But I just want to try and get through the presentation as best as I can. See that you do not, this is reading from Muwatta Ibn Malik, page 352. See that you do not forget the verse about stoning. So this is a highly suspect statement. Why would you say, see you do not forget? It smacks of later writers putting words into the mouths of past figures to account for their current prejudices and beliefs, i.e. stoning is good, stoning is justified, stoning is what we do. It's very convenient. Okay? It goes on and says, we do not find it in the book of Allah. Here they are clearly grappling with a practice understood to be Islamic, but cannot be referenced in the Quran. The Apostle of Allah, may peace be upon him, had ordered stoning, and we too have done so after him. So it clearly again understood that the practice of stoning came from Muhammad and was practiced by his companions. By the Lord who holds the possession of my life, if people should not accuse me of adding to the book of Allah, I would have this transcribed therein. So adamant is the author of this tradition that he believes that he puts into the words of the character here who's speaking, which let's just have a look. Does it mention who that character is? Can't say it off the top of my head. That he's put into the words of this character that he would have added it to the Quran had he not been accused. And I think, to me, again, this smacks of revisionism. It is a revisionist hadith that is accounting for a popular practice that is endorsed in Muslim circles, or was endorsed in Muslim circles, but can't be justified in the Quran. And interestingly, is being rejected by increasing number of Muslims today, because it's just not needed. I'm afraid that after a long time, this is reading from Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 8, hadith 817, page 539. I'm afraid that after a long time has passed, somebody will say, by Allah, we do not find the verse of Rajam in Allah's book, and thus they will go astray by leaving an obligation which Allah has revealed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is exactly what is happening today. If you just Google it, you'll find that there are Muslims arguing against the idea of stoning. And they're arguing against the practice on the basis that it's not in the Quran. And the fact that so many Muslims have done this in the past demonstrates that, to many, the hadiths can and have taken precedence over the Quran. So the fact that many Muslims do practice stoning and seek to justify it and defend it, even though it's not in the Quran, demonstrates that actually hadiths trump the Quran. Think about that for a minute. You see, the narrative that we get from the apologists vis-a-vis the reality on the ground, it just doesn't line up. And I've said it multiple times, there's 3 ways to tell something is false. Is it internally incoherent? Does it contradict reality? Does it work in practice? And what we're seeing is internal incoherence, contradictions to archaeological evidence, and there's problems of practice. Not least being that if you get it wrong, you've killed someone who's innocent. Now, these hadiths seem to suggest that at the time of their writing, the practice of stoning was common and popular, but could not be validated from the Quran. So, or at least from the Quran of the 9th and 10th centuries. And so Muslims were trying to account for this discrepancy, and in such a way that they could keep the popular punishment, but explain why it was not found in the Quran. If these hadiths are true, and I'm not for one moment suggesting that they are, the Quran has been changed. Of these, or alternatively, these sahih hadiths are not sahih. Either way, you've got a problem. Muslims have been, therefore, acting contrary to the Quran for centuries. For centuries. Or at worst, Muhammad instigated something, everyone, because he was a prophet and he could, and there's no Quranic revelation to justify it, which means that Muhammad would be culpable of bid'ah and innovation. Now, Rory, who was it? Was it Rory Husky who wanted to jump on? Was it you, Rory? Let me just, I want to invite you on, but I want to invite you on, hear what you've got to say, have a cognitive point or two. I'll let you say your piece, but you won't be on forever, okay? So the brother, the ex-Muslim who wanted to jump on and talk, if you could jump on the link. I think it was you. Yeah, it was you, Rory. So if you wanna jump on, say, I'll let you talk about a point or two, and then we'll.
Yeah.
Peace be with you, Rory. I'm all right, thanks be to God. How are you?
Good. You know what you said about it would just prove Muslims, in a sense, don't worship Allah but worship Muhammad, in a sense, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. I mean, if the Quran is saying one thing, which is to flog adulterers, and Muslims are doing something else, and they're doing that because Muhammad did it, then that means in the game of trumps, Muhammad trumps Allah on this particular issue. But if Muhammad trumps Allah on anything, then that's a massive problem.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is going to be, there's this guy called, I think his name is Reason Answers.
Mm-hmm.
Right, he's a Christian like us, brother in Christ. He actually made a video on Hamza Zotsis, the Greek convert to Islam.
Yeah.
He proved, Hamza Zotsis proved the case of, he made a response. You should watch that video. Type in Reason Answers apologetic videos. He made a case that Muslims worship Muhammad, but they don't realize it though.
You'll have to email me the link. I ain't got time to do it today.
No, not today.
Yeah. Anyway, bro, is there anything else you want to contribute before you go?
Yeah, I was going to say we should do a live stream together responding to Dr. Zakir Naik, because I got passages that I want to talk about, that how Moses and Muhammad aren't alike. Like, for instance, it says...
Okay, brother, we're not going to get off the topic. I'm talking about a particular thing. Anyway, send me your suggestion via email. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Okay, brother?
Peace of the Lord Jesus Christ with you.
And also with you. God bless. So, Continuing with our discussion, reading from Sunan Abu Dawud, volume 3, page 1114. Aisha said, a man got up for prayer at night. He read the Quran and raised his voice in reading. When morning came, the Apostle of Allah said, may Allah have mercy on so-and-so. Last night he reminded me a number of verses I was about to forget. Stop. Just think about what you just heard. Muhammad himself is being reminded of the Quran. Now, if the source cannot remember it all, as in Muhammad could not remember it all, can we be sure that those who survived the Battle of Yamama did? Now, interestingly, there's certain logical questions that one has to ask of this this thing is, how do you know you're about to forget something? How do you know you're about to forget something? The statement itself is irrational. It seems to me that Muhammad, if this source is true, actually did forget and was genuinely reminded. Not that he was about to forget, he actually forgot. Now, it goes on, as it will continue. Sahih al-Bukhari, volume 6, Hadith 509 and Hadith 511, found on page 478. I found the last verse of Surah Al-Tawbah, repentance, with Abi Kuzamai al-Ansari, and I did not find it with anybody other than him. Stop for a minute. Think about what you just heard. If he had died at the Battle of Yamama, would this verse be in the Quran today? Therefore, how many other verses were found only with one person amongst those who died at the Battle of Yamama? This shows that there was neither a complete memory of the Quran in one person, because this verse was only found with one person, which means that it wasn't with any other person, which means that every other person had a recitation variant. Nor was it found with a complete mushaf, because if it was found with one person, why wasn't it found in a mushaf? Otherwise, the checking and the editing would have been very different. The verse is, verily there has come to you an apostle from amongst yourselves. It grieves him that you should receive any injury or difficulty, till the end of Baraha. Continuing. Ibn Abi Dawud, Kitab al-Musahif, page 11. Khuzamai ibn Thabit said, I see you have overlooked 2 verses and have not written them. They said, and which are they? He replied, I had it directly, automatically or spontaneously from the Messenger of Allah. Surah 9, Ayah 128. There has come to you a message from yourselves. It grieves him that you should perish. He is very concerned about you. To the believers, he is kind and merciful. To the end of the surah. Uthman said, I bear witness that these verses are from Allah. Stop. Think about what you just heard. Here we see that mistakes were being caught by Zayd bin Thabit in the process of the creation of his own edition of the Quran. Now, this means that mistakes could be made. So that begs the question, what about all the mistakes that were not spotted? If other mistakes can be made, because we've got evidence that mistakes were being made, how do we know that all the mistakes were spotted? Now, it seems that what is happening is that the Quran, in quote marks, was like a shattered pot with lots of different pieces in different places, and that the first Muslim community has been captured in people's memories and in various disparate written materials, possibly amongst other writings that could be confused with the Quran, that were not actually the Quran, and that the compilation was an exercise in trying to identify what sayings and what material constituted the Quran, as opposed to just any other kind of saying that Muhammad had said, because if you believe the Hadiths, he said a lot. Each statement had to be witnessed to as being from Allah, which means that if this is the case, the whole of the Quran is dependent upon the construction of the Islamic community at Muhammad's death and not upon Muhammad himself. Did you catch that? If it is a case that Muslims are having to cipher and filter what constitutes the Quran from what does not constitute the Quran, amidst all the things that Muhammad said, then it is the Muslims who succeeded Muhammad that have defined for us what is the Quran and not Muhammad. Their foibles, their memories, their imperfections are all at play. It is simply beyond human reckoning that such work could have captured so much prose and maintained it from such a poor starting point. Memorizers were lost. Verses were found only with one person. The scribers forgot to write verses. The conclusion is that the Quran is not supported as a perfect text. The evidence doesn't support that. And I think these are the kinds of questions that Yasser Qadhi was referring to when he said that our traditional historical narrative does not answer some of the pertinent questions. Now, I'm only about halfway through this, and I'm going to have to stop. So I'm going to come back to this and carry on and do a part 2. Are there any questions? Any thoughts? Any comments? Anything that you guys want to say? If you're talking to me, put at me. If you're talking to someone else, continue your conversations. Okie dokie. I'll just wait for you guys to think of what you're saying. Otherwise, we'll draw it for a close today, and I'll come back probably either on later today or another day this week, and we'll finish off where we got up to. Never, Rory. Okay. I'll wait you to formulate your questions. Guys, just a bit of personal news whilst you're all thinking up your stuff. Oh, wait. You're welcome to Tanya. God bless you, sister. If you need to get in touch with me, anyone and everybody, here is my email address. If you need to drop me an email, that's the place to do it. Just on a bit of personal news for me, these last couple of years I've been doing a discernment about what I feel God is calling me to do. And I feel that it has been confirmed that I should continue as an evangelist in the way that I am doing and have been doing, but now go towards doing it full time. So I have a steering group, as you do, people to hold me accountable, both for how I spend my time and how I spend money. And in the next couple of months, I am looking for those who want to enter into a covenant relationship with me, basically who are willing to tithe in my direction so that I can have a wage to commit myself to this kind of work on a full-time basis. And that's the idea. That is the idea. And the aim is to do this by January. The steering group has 5 people on it from different backgrounds, including one pastor. and they have authority to decide what is my kind of wage, and then to scrutinize and sign off on the books to make sure that I'm being responsible with cash. So what I'm now looking for from anyone who watches this video is people who are willing to enter into a covenant partnership. And that would mean essentially people who are willing to faithfully tithe £10 or £20 towards me, that collectively would pour into a pot that would give me a monthly wage, and that monthly wage would then allow me to live here in London whilst being an evangelist around the city, and then through all the social media with all the other people that I'm talking to. Which is why when I first debated Mansour, I said I was a tourist, because I was here to test something. And really, it seems that the timing was in God's good timing, that Jay was leaving and that I entered the corner at that pretty much exact moment. And this kind of work has been a blessing to you guys. I know, I get the testimonies, an encouragement to Christians. We've seen people become Christian through the work that we're doing, and now I'm looking to push into it full time. And during this furlough, this lockdown, I've actually been doing it full time, because I've been on lockdown, on furlough, receiving 100% of my wage, but for 0% of the work. And instead, I've been doing more of this kind of stuff. A lot of it not on camera, actually. Like 90% of what I do is off camera. And you guys have interacted with me, many of you. So I would like to invite you who are Christians, who are in a position to do so, to prayerfully consider the possibility of entering into a covenant relationship with me, starting in January, tithing in my direction, as I say, £10 or £20 a month, so that I can pull that together into a wage that has been set by my steering group, and they will overlook the accounts and sign them off every 4 months. I'm going to be building a website, and we'll talk about how this goes forward. And then I'll be that paid missionary that I'm often mocked for being, even though I'm not. And I've been doing it all these good couple of years from goodwill, with a lot of goodwill from you guys. I mean, there have been people sending gifts and showing their support. So we appreciate that. And I want to say thank you to everyone who's supported us thus far. By the way, I am also just filling space, waiting for you guys to think of questions on the topic. So if you got a question on full-time on the actual topic, do drop it in. So yeah, I'm also looking for people to join into prayer circles and to pray with us in this, and people who are interested in setting up groups of people to pray for the conversion of souls, to pray for the conversion particularly of Muslims, and particularly of Arab Muslims, who I have a lot of love for and who I want to see come to the knowledge of salvation. That's why I've started learning Arabic. So you'll see that come out in the future, though I'm a long way off. I've only just started. Second run up to Arabic. Okay, guys, I have filled the airspace for a good couple of minutes. I've updated you all. If you've got any questions, drop us an email, but there is no questions coming through the live stream. Please tell me, I know, just as a way of rating it, how useful you found today out of 10, 10 being very useful, 1 being not useful, where you put this live stream so that I can get some feedback about if it's the right kind of content that I should be giving to you guys. And yeah, hopefully it'll help me to improve each time we do stuff like this. So, and then after I've seen your feedback, we'll bring it to an end. So if you could put that down for us. Thanks, Ranch. Just Ranch, no one else? Zealous Christian, Bobby's not a number. So just Ranj and Tony. No one else has an opinion. Okay. Okay. Okay, so most of you, Snow Leopard 22 is not 1 out of 10. Some of you are bad listeners. Okie dokie. Right, we'll be doing a bit more on this later. I've taken a note of where I've got up to. But let's just close down this session again with a psalm. To you, O Lord, I call, my rock. Do not refuse to hear me. For if you are silent to me, I shall be like those who go down to the pit. Hear the voice of my supplication as I cry to you for help, as I lift up my hands toward your most holy sanctuary. Do not drag me away with the wicked, with those who are workers of evil, who speak peace with their neighbors, while mischief is in their hearts. Repay them according to their work, and according to the evil of their deeds, repay them according to the work of their hands. Render them their due reward, because they do not regard the works of Yahweh, or the works of his hands. He will break them down and build them up no more. Blessed be Yahweh, for he has heard the sound of my pleading. Yahweh is my strength and my shield. In him my heart trusts. So I am helped, and my heart exults. With my song I give thanks to him. Yahweh is the strength of his people. He is the saving refuge of his anointed. O save your people and bless your heritage. Be their shepherd and carry them forever. So just to let you know, guys, I'm trying to do more live streams going forward, so they'll be shorter, but hopefully more often. There may be another one later on today. I want to wish you all a lovely afternoon, a lovely evening, a lovely morning, or a lovely night, depending on where you are. And we'll speak again soon. God bless.